The following is a presentation of 13ABC Action News. Now, your table is ready. Join 13ABC's Jeff Smith with the decision makers of Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. This is the Roundtable.
And a good Sunday afternoon to you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here on 13ABC, the Roundtable program. Coming up in our second segment, some of you might have been lucky enough to get that return money from Uncle Sam this year. So what's the best play for your cash? We'll talk to a financial expert and he'll have the advice for you if you want to start up that savings account and get it boosted in these tough economic times. But first, we want to talk more to you about one of the, I guess, the linchpins of our community, of course, education being the key. And over the last couple of months, we have seen the state of Ohio implement and talk about implementing a new grading system for school districts here in our state. And around Northwest Ohio, that has been met with some uncertainty and also some, I guess, some emotion as well. And that's why we bring on for you today some of our area superintendents to discuss the new proposed grading system. With us today, Tom Hosler, superintendent of Perrysburg Schools, also Diana Savage from the Bryan City Schools. Welcome to you. First time here on the Roundtable. And also Dr. Kevin Miller from Ottawa Hills, that school district there. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Let's start the conversation with this new grading system, and I want to show people at home what we're talking about. In 2011, you had 382 districts around the state that were given that excellent grade, excellent with distinction or just excellent, essentially an A. They're doing a great job. Under the new proposal, which would be a letter grade system, only 22 districts would receive an A, essentially, and none of them would be here in Northwest Ohio. Tom, as you look at the implementation of this, the timing, you guys think, couldn't be worse.
Right. Well, I think, you know, the state superintendent said the current model that we're using is not serving the public's needs, that 57% of the schools are excellent in Ohio, and that's just not accurate. And I think there's some points that he has. I think some of that is accurate, but I think the trouble that we have with, you know, the direction that the state's going in, frankly, is, number one, they created the system. We didn't. They said, here is the model. And I know we were just talking, Diane said, they worked very hard to get that excellent. That's what the state said. This is the yardstick. So now the change takes place, and out of 1,001 school systems and charter schools, which are public schools that are going to be measured, only 22 or 2% are going to be an A district. And that's a huge swing. So the question is, if 57 is too high of a number and the public can't tell what's you know, truly an excellent district, well, now you've created a system where only 2% are A's. So I don't think they've really solved their problem.
We're going to look at those A districts in just a moment, because as you look at that list, there is something that stands out very descriptively for our audience, and you will see that. I want to pull out a quote from, you mentioned the state superintendent, Stan Hefner, and he came out, and when he was asked about defending this new system, he said, "Change can be difficult, especially when districts and schools have been told for years that they are excellent or effective," essentially putting out there that this has been a false front. But you guys, Diana, you were saying you worked daggone hard out of an effective rating to get to that excellent status, and this last go-around, excellent with distinction.
Absolutely. Our staff has put forth a lot of effort to meet what the state set as their standard, to be proficient on the test, to show academic growth every year in our students. And our staff put together a plan that helped us achieve that level, that highest level. And now, all of a sudden, all the rules are changing again. I think that's what's most frustrating for this. We're not saying that we don't want to be providing truthful information to our communities, because we absolutely want to do that. But our frustration is that, you know, we work very hard to get that rating and to do everything the state wanted us to do, and now we're changing the rules again. So now schools are going to look like they're not performing as well, when really it's the rules that are changing or the tests that are changing.
This all began when Governor John Kasich came into office and said he wanted to really shake up education here in the state of Ohio. His spokesperson put out a quote last week, and we want to show it to you there at home. He said, "We want them, these new rankings, these new grades, in yesterday. No one is backing away and saying we need additional time. We are not seeking a delay. We want to see this go into effect this year. But Kevin, as you go into this next school year, and even as you sit here in the, I guess we're rounding third and heading for home, as Joe Nuxall used to say when he did the Cincinnati Reds games, but as you get around this end of the school year, you've got to be going into next year with a little bit of trepidation, thinking a lot can change.
Well, here's the thing. We all know we have new core standards coming, and we're starting to concentrate and work very, very hard in making a change from our current standards to the new core standards. So we talk curriculum. We talk curriculum all the time, and I do think that one thing that the state testing program has done, and even the rating system, is it's caused school systems to take a sharper look at their curricula across the board and have more discussions about it. So that's the positive thing. But when you talk about moving forward, you do have trepidation because you don't know on what measures you're going to be performing.
And you also don't want them misinterpreted, I would assume.
Absolutely not. I mean, it's when you talk about the governor saying this needs to be in effect right away, that's part of the problem. There was no evident planning. There was no involvement of the stakeholders. There was no discussion with the superintendents across the state. No analysis of how this might impact particular school systems. It was just a massive rollout.
You feel like it's being shoved down your throat?
That would be a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, we found out about it pretty much as the world found out about it. And it's fraught with issues as far as I'm concerned. We welcome accountability. We live in a world of continuous improvement. That's what effective school systems do. But the problem is that the accountability has to be equitable, and it has to be fair.
There was a lot of talk when this came out early this year when we focused here at 13 ABC. We talked about the Toledo Public Schools and another district here in the state of Ohio that would essentially, under these new grades, get an F. But lost in that shuffle are all of those school districts out there that, like Bryan City Schools, that were excellent with distinctions. Look at this list that we've got just from Northwest Ohio. Here are your school districts this last go-around that had excellent with distinction tags, basically A+. And Archbold, Bowling Green, Bryan, Clyde Green Springs, Northwood, Rossford, all dropped down to a B letter grade. Then you go to the next page and you look at those school districts that were considered excellent. They were essentially the A's. But guess what? Under this new proposal, these guidelines, Anthony Wayne, Findlay, Lake, Ottawa Hills, Perrysburg, Springfield, Sylvania, Wauseon all get letter B's. They are all put into this same grouping. And Tom, is that fair to look at every school in Northwest Ohio as the same?
Well, I think you go back to the state's desire to make a change, and that is not all of you can be excellent. And I can understand that and agree with that to a point. But now you've created a system where if I'm the average taxpayer and I'm looking for accountability and how my school is doing, I don't have a better feel today than I did before. And that's the whole point, that we're spending all this time and energy trying to solve a problem, and they really haven't fixed their problem. I agree with the state superintendent that there has to be a change, but you know, when you create an environment and a system where only 2% are eligible to get an A, and let's talk about those 2%. You know, the #1 school system in the state spends $24,000 a year on students. How many students do they have? 53 students.
It's a charter school in Cuyahoga County.
Correct. So here we are with 4,800 students. How do you compare us? And by the way, they only have, I think, 5 or 8 performance index measures that they're evaluated on. We have 26. So, you know, I don't want to come across as whiny or, you know, here we go again, you know, the sky's falling. Give us the system, the program, explain it to us so that we understand what it is and give us a chance to do it. But this tinkering that goes on, several of the districts that are A districts, their performance index score came out in November, and they're ranked 200 or 300 in the state, and
Kevin,
they're now an A district.
Ottawa Hills got, I think, 29th or something on that list.
Out of traditional school systems, we were the 5th highest, which is the 6th year in a row that we've been in the top 5. Our performance index has gone up each of the last 3 years, so we continue to improve and get kids performing at the highest levels on their tests. Of the tests taken by the students in our school, 76% scored at advanced or accelerated, the highest level. 97% were proficient or above. For the last 12 years, Ottawa Hills Schools has met 100% of the indicators put out by the Ohio Department of Education. So I look at that and I say, how is that not a high-performing school system?
And the other story we did with you guys was when, for years, you have held that excellent with distinction moniker, and you lost that this last go-around.
We did.
And your phrase, if I can just steal from you, you said, we had topped out.
Absolutely. It's the value-added measure, which, again, I think it's a great measure. I like the value-added piece because it basically looks at how much academic growth a student achieves over a school year, and I think that's a great measure. The problem is they're applying value-added to the state tests, which were not developed to measure growth, and so they're kind of fitting a square peg into a round hole. We knew that ultimately we could not continue to exceed the value-added measure because ultimately you cannot continue to run ahead of the curve. So we knew it would catch up with us, and this past year it did. So we did not exceed the value-added measure, but we met value-added, meaning our students had 1 year's worth of academic growth. But yet on this new local report card, that is rated as a C. So because that's a C and we received A's in all other areas, our final grade is a B. So my question to the Ohio Department of Education is, show me that statistically a school system can continue to exceed value added year in and year out over an extended period of time, and I'll buy in. But they can't because it's not statistically true.
One of the larger teacher unions in the state of Ohio came out with a statement talking about how all of this affects perception as far as the public is concerned. And I want to get into that in just a minute with you, Diana, but let's take a look at that quote if we can there at home. They said the downward shift in ratings for almost all schools based on the new formula will have a negative impact on the districts as they seek levy support from their communities and may have, and it continues on, a ripple effect on both community pride and local property values. You said they're grading on a bell curve right now. Basically, you get to exam time, you got to bump it up so nobody fails. But everybody's locked into that middle.
Yeah,
so you have a bunch of, Ohio becomes this, well, we're happy with being right there in the middle.
Absolutely. I really do believe when you look at the decrease in the number of schools who will be rated excellent or excellent with distinction, and you drop down to that 22, you're really essentially creating a bell curve for the state of Ohio. That there will be very few select schools at the A level, there will be probably a smaller percentage at the failure level, and everyone else will be in that B, C, D range. And again, I go back to kind of what Kevin was saying. You know, our community does take pride in excellent and excellent with distinction. It's a moniker for, it's a cheer for our community, and it's where people want to come to raise their families and raise their children. And the state, again, says the purpose of changing the grade card is to make sure communities understand the rating system. I think they understand excellent.
So how do you explain to people out there who are watching this morning and this afternoon, or they may be watching online, how do you say to them, okay, we get it, we need to be, do you say we need to be better?
Absolutely.
Do you say we need to do our jobs better so we don't have this be any longer?
Absolutely, and again.
But that's not to say we're not doing it good enough right now.
It's not to say we're not working hard, and again, the testing measures all rely on one performance. It's one reading test given on one day in the spring, it's one math test given on one day in the spring, science test, and if you have a student that for whatever reason, that day is just not at the top of their A game, that student is going to suffer, and in essence your school is going to suffer. That doesn't mean the other 179 days that you as a school system and that student did not put forth their best foot every single day to achieve.
Tom, we've seen these delays. You and I discussed weeks ago about how the state implemented the caliper test when they wanted kids tested for body fat, and then the state allowed school districts to apply for a waiver. Do we see this waiver coming, you think, before the fall hits?
With the body mass index?
No, I'm sorry. I'm using that as an example.
No, I don't think so. I think
this
it's
great
pretty
thing's
clear
going to happen.
This is going to happen. This is something that I think that they want to get shored up, and we're going to have to deal with it. And I think the message, just to piggyback, you know, we have ACT scores. We have students that go on and do great things after they graduate from our schools. We understand, you know, what success is, and it can't be defined just on one indicator. And I think we're careful not to put too many eggs in that basket, but, you know, just tell us what we need to do, keep it steady so that we can hit that target, and let us go to work. This changing all the time because, you know, percentages, it's not how we run classrooms. Parents would be very upset. They'd be furious if their childs were evaluated based on these grades. Well,
are the schools all even? I mean, everybody's going to get a B?
You know, again, just the data says, well, not everyone was excellent, and I don't think everyone's a B. I think you have to define what that is, and you have to make sure that people understand what it is, and I think they missed that mark. I understand they need to make that change, I agree, but I think in the haste to get it out in front and you know, shoot now and aim later, doesn't work.
Well, I know at this table there's a lot of pride in those scores that you have had over the years. Kevin, is everybody a B?
Well, obviously not. I mean, there are school systems that have a variety of things to work on. I mean, we as a school system have a variety of things to work on, and we will always know that, we will always admit that, and we will always focus on that. But I feel like if Ottawa Hills is not an A school system, I'm not sure what an A school system looks like. When I look at multiple measures and I look at our ACT and SAT results, they are several points above state and national averages. When I look at our advanced placement results, and out of all the tests taken, almost 87% of our students scored at 3 or above. But when we look at the average AP result, it is light years ahead of the national average, but also our AP results are ahead of the global averages. And we talk about making global comparisons, not just national comparisons. So,
and I was also going to point out, with cuts in state funding as far as what is going to each and every student, some of these smaller schools which did well in the rankings, they are able to lot more of that money.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, if we talked about BMI and calipers, so an analogy using diet, if I need to cut weight and lose a few pounds like I do now, one of the things that you do is you weigh yourself every day. Well, if I weigh myself 10 times a day, does that help me lose more weight? No, and that's what these tests do. They don't help change the quality of instruction. There's no dialogue about what has to happen in the classroom. All the focus that has been coming down has been on stepping on that scale, stepping off the scale, coming back a few minutes later, stepping on the scale and off. That will not change your weight.
And Diana, do you see more of a voice coming from the teachers' unions? Do you see more of a voice coming from the districts around the state and trying to block this thing? Obviously, everybody's involved with this school year, but going into next school year, I mean, I asked the question if there are going to be waivers or the possibility of that, but do superintendents around the state let this just go through?
Well, I think we try.
Do you want them to?
I don't. I would love to see them wait and implement this change when we have implemented the Common Core, which will happen in 2014, 2015, and when the new tests arrive.
Well, it may be a rally cry here today on our table.
I mean, that would be the ideal, but are teachers concerned? Are administrators concerned? Are superintendents concerned? Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, the ideal, if the state is going to make a change, and I'm not here to say that we can't make changes. We make changes every day. It's not that we're against change. It's that let's do it in a planned manner, as you said.
All of you, thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. We're going to post some of those results on our website, 13abc.com. You can read up some of the articles that have been posted around the state as well. When we return, we talk more about your savings right after this.